Welcome to Middle Fingers Up. It's good to Gup Shup edition. Here with Gup Shup, we believe that meaningful conversations, even the tough ones, can start with just a little friendly chit-chat. Whether it's lighthearted or deep, Gup Shup is where we get real. We break it down and maybe even heal a little. So today's my second time doing this, and the first round went really well. So today we're gonna address being that person in the room and navigating conversations on racism and identity. So really the reason why we're getting into this today is many of you know, and we've all been that person in the room, the one who ruins a mood by addressing a racially insensitive comment or by just saying something people don't want to hear. So to help me tackle this, I've brought in Madison, host of the Bloodstained podcast, who in season 1 uses a true crime lens to discuss the slave trade era and highlight uncomfortable truths. Before I bring Madison in, I just want to talk about why this topic. So literally yesterday, I was talking to my 10-year-old son, and he shared a moment that struck a chord for me. So he expressed feeling like disconnected at school when a classmate brought up hurtful topics about our South Asian heritage. So for me, obviously, it was disheartening to see my son navigating this confusing world. He's balancing this collective shield for his own identity while figuring out friendships and where he fits in. And the uncertainty of whether something is truly racism makes it difficult to speak up. You might feel foolish or worry that you're overreacting, especially when others don't seem to experience the same things. And he's 10. So if this is what he might be going through, we know what it's like as adults when we struggle to speak up. But he chose to speak up and address his classmates' racism. So seeing my son go through this made me reflect on my own experiences. I talk about being a child of immigrant parents. And a lot of us in my generation, we talk about this thing called, oh yeah, but we turned out fine. And lately I've been thinking about that statement a lot. And I can't help but wonder, is what we want to focus on being the fact that we turned out fine? Could I have turned out fine without facing these challenges that my kids are currently navigating with racism and my identity being sort of questioned, mixed up? Does my son have to go through some of this stuff to turn out fine as well? So I just look at him and I think, okay, what does being fine really mean? And is that really what we're going for? So this happened yesterday, but we really chose this topic prior to that, Madison and I, because her and I are revisiting a little bleep of a conversation to dive deeper into some of the themes we earlier explored when she joined me on episode 91, Almost Nothing in This Society is Coincidental. So in that discussion, we touched on systemic issues and the hidden narratives shaping our world. Today, we're building on those ideas and hopefully turning our focus towards understanding how sometimes these structures can impact the marginalized communities, specifically in relation to identity, privilege, and resistance, all in just a comment that's made. So connecting back to societal structures, when we talk about that, we often think in terms, again, of systems and policies, but the ripple effects are felt on a deeply personal level. And I feel like by confronting uncomfortable truths, we begin to see how things like racism, bias, and privilege play out in everyday scenarios and shape the identities and experiences of those affected. So it's not just about naming the issues, but understanding their roots, impact, and what it really means to advocate for change. So recently, I shared how I found myself in exactly this position. I've talked a few times about my husband and I were having dinner with two friends who know about my podcast and the type of discussions I have. And, one of them casually asked, what is racism even? Who even started it? And as soon as I tried to respond, it was clear it wasn't a real question, it felt like it was a setup. And my son talked about feeling that way too. The energy shifted. Our friends went straight to defense mode, as did I, almost as if like, I had crossed this line by even trying to give an honest answer back to them. So then came the comment following, the question of what is racism? Like, why are you attacking me? I've had it with all your white people talk. And so then, it got nasty from there. And so it's continuing to carry out after the dinner because now everyone wants to avoid. And I think we're going to hear that word a lot today, is this avoidance piece when these comments come up and nobody wants to say anything. Somebody wants to, somebody doesn't, and all these sorts of feelings come up. So let's welcome Madison, because I think this is a good time to bring you in. And together maybe do a shout out to anyone that has been that person in the room that's taken the risk and said something and spoken up. Hey?
Hello.
Hi.
Oh my God. Hi.
I said a lot.
You said a lot, but there's so much to dive into. I mean, I think the first thing about being that person in the room is, unfortunately, if you're a marginalized person, you're always that person in the room because the default is the majority. And so when you grow up in that space over time, I think people cope with it in different ways. But I, and clearly your son, have that spirit in you where it happens and it kind of wells up. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you don't even have time to think because it's such a visceral reaction because you feel what they intended you to feel. They were othering you in that moment in front of people and kind of daring you to buck up against them. Mm-hmm. What they're doing is enforcing the majority's societal expectation of you and who you are and who you show up as. And these little instances, we call them microaggressions, where it's like, is that aggressive or is it not aggressive? Like, I can't tell, and I'm sitting here thinking about it, but the intentionality is the same. It's to make you feel small, othered, pointed out, especially in your son's case. As kids, everyone's trying to fit in.
Yeah.
It's not about being different. It's about having what everyone has and doing what everyone's doing. And so when you are still trying to figure out your identity internally and someone calls that out to question in front of people, whether it's calling out, your South Asian identity, or in my case, my hair or something like that, it's like, what you don't realize as a kid, you just feel the emotion of it, is like that was 100% intentional.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people can feign the ignorance, but at the end of the day, whether it was intentional for that girl or that classmate to make your son feel that way, it's a learned behavior. Mm-hmm. And it's indicative of watching your parents or your community do that othering to other people, and you're mirroring that. And so I think that, like, when you're that person in the room, you just have to be that person in the room sometimes. Like, to me, I also have a philosophy of, like, if I really don't care, then I really don't care. I can be indifferent. There have been instances where I will never forget this. I was at a party in college and we were just dancing. And there are like these Black guys and they had white girlfriends or whatever. And like that dynamic is a conversation for another day, honey. It's a whole thing. In our community, it's a whole thing. But these white girls, like, I was dancing with my friend. She was also Black. And she had these earrings that were like the shape of Africa. And one of the white girls
girl did?
No, my friend.
Okay.
And then one of the white girls came next to us and was kind of like dancing around us. And she turned and looked at my friend. She's like, wow, I really love your earrings. They're so ethnic.
Oh,
and it was like clear exactly in that moment what the fuck she was doing.
Yeah.
And to me, I just kind of like, me and my friend just kind of turned and walked away, because at the other part of being that person in the room is being measured about when you're that person in the room. And sometimes you can't be because it's so emotional, but like, you have to weigh the options, unfortunately, because of the optics of it. It can so easily turn into, why are you attacking me?
Yeah.
And people will automatically point the darkest person as the person at fault, always. So it's just, you have to decide, and it's a difficult balance to play because some people, it's about self-preservation at the end of the day. And I think for some people, they want to be that person all the time, but they don't understand that that ends up burning them out, you know?
Yeah, well, that whole emotional toll of pressure, like even my son talked about it. And truthfully, I felt it too as a grown-ass woman. I was in a 1:4 ratio, so three white people, me, and so already feeling isolated in the conversation as it's about to happen. But sometimes like they say, when there's a setup, you read, and it's so sad because we go to the internet to read these things and it's just like, this is not how we should handle it. But it'll say like, look for sarcasm and tone and you talked about microaggressions, and I think there's just so much subtlety. Like the people that I was with are such good friends, and there's so much genuineness, kindness, love, all these sort of things, leading up to us being there. And so there was no sarcastic tone when this question was asked. It's a legit, kind of like gaslighting setup. So it's hard to sometimes read the tone. And I think that's where the confusion is, like, do I say something? Do I not say something? Because you're not sure, is this person is speaking very confidently as if this is just a fact. And so when they asked me about racism, and even when my kid's classmate made the comment that they did, it was a fact. And even my son said, Mom, like he knew he's like, I have a friend that made a poor choice and he didn't know it. He learned about it. This kid knew what he was saying and he was being intentional. And it's so sad because he was being so confident about what he was saying that the two other kids agreed with him. So I'm just watching this like dynamic roll out with 10-year-olds, and I'm like, holy shit, this is exactly what we grow into, and we can't address it because we're just so used to it by the time we're adults. But that is how it plays out, right? People are like, oh yeah, you're right, that is how it is. Let's agree with the white person in the room. And when people of color join in as well, I think that becomes difficult because we all are brought up different. And so, I know for how many years I had my own internal racism that I'm still working through. So how many times was I the other guy in the room being like, relax, so-and-so. Like, why are we talking about this?
I think we've all been that person in the room in both senses. Like you said, like been the person that's like, chill, or been the person that's like, I need to say something, because I think like you're always doing this dance, and it's one of those things when you step outside of your sphere of influence and where you are safest and in control and you have to interact with other people, you're always doing a dance. Not everything happens the way you want it to. Things are annoying. People cut you in line, all of this stuff, but you're always measuring yourself because you're trying to show yourself that you have self-control over your emotions and your thoughts. And it's unfortunate, I think, because the optics of situations never allow marginalized people to get out of the civility line. You're not supposed to raise your voice. You're not supposed to be aggressive. You're not supposed to speak with conviction, because immediately the switch gets flipped and you're the bad person. And so when you say like, maybe I was both, I've been both 100%. And it's one of those things where it's like, you really, because optics are so delicate, it's like, do I really want to add this weight to the rest of the stuff that I'm going through? Or can I just get through this moment and just not acknowledge it? Or do I really feel like I need to say something? And no one's perfect, and everyone kind of is socialized differently, and their threshold for BS is different. Like there's certain things that I just will not respond to or don't care about. Like there's ongoing conversations about like, like white people saying the N-word when they rap music, or like if they're typing lyrics and all of that kind of thing. And I, at 28 years old, have come to the point where it's like, if there's a white person who is a grown up who is insisting on saying the N-word, they are 100% the problem. They can try and explain it. They can try and say what they want to say. But am I going to waste my time pointing it out? They know what they're doing. And I think that's kind of the sad part, because going back to your situation that happened at dinner with your friend, it's like the hardest part of those moments when it's someone close to you is realizing that that was intentional. I don't care what they say after it, but it's a doubling down. There are ways to ask people certain questions in a curious way. Like you and, you know, your husband have been having these, you know, racialized conversations, which is important. And it's like, but you know, there's a difference between someone that's trying to like neg you and somebody who's trying to like actually learn from you and actually learn what your perspective is. And it's obvious in how she presented the question that wasn't on the agenda. Well, she wanted to know.
You're right. And I think that the thing that came, you know, you go to see afterwards, it's like, you know, we learn about each other in crisis. Crisis can be opportunity. And it's always interesting as a leader. I'd have employees, and it was always interesting to see how everyone, you know, like my leaders watch too. Okay, you got good skills. We can work on this. You know, these things stress you out. Crisis is a great way to learn about yourself. And what happens afterwards, that post aftercare. And, you know, when you get an argument with someone, there's follow up or not. And, you know, I said to you in that recording that I respect the fact that they haven't come to me at this point because I don't need a bullshit conversation. But what's happening is avoidance. So when you realize when time goes by and you haven't had this conversation and it's because this person made this racial comment, they can say they're uncomfortable. They don't know what to say or whatnot, but we're all humans. We've all apologized. We've all figured it out. When you choose not to go back to this uncomfortable conversation, it's so interesting to see how people avoid. And so the what I've seen happen now in the pattern is let's call me out, I'm the attacker, then let's avoid, and then now let's go to this, well, let's just let bygones be bygones because the world's, you know, it's a short life, like let's just, you know, and so now it's being treated like that, where it's like, why are you guys holding a grudge? Why are you so upset? Let it go. That's your opinion, Kiran. So I think, you know, it contributes to why people choose to not. So can I ask you from your perspective, what is a good sign or what is a good strategy or something for people that are learning their voice, learning to speak up? Because I do admire when those, you know, try, like you said, it's not perfect. And, you know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But for those of us that are trying, what is a strategy or some piece of advice we can keep in mind as we decide, is today the day I should say something or not?
I have two pieces of advice. The first one is, will you ever see this person again? Do you give a fuck about this person? That is number one, because that, if you don't give a fuck of if you ever see this person again, turn on that heel and walk away. It's not worth it getting into arguments with strangers when, if we're actually trying to have a conversation and have me teach you something, I'm not invested in teaching you. You know, I know that this is going to come from a defensive place. I know that I don't know anything about you. And also you're keeping yourself out of drama that could escalate into something you don't know what. They could call the cops and now you're the black person yelling and now it's this whole other thing. So I think mastery of, is this even worth my fucking time? I think that's number one. Number two is, I would say, is for sure about like, can I deliver my statements in a measured way? And some people will say that's tone policing yourself. But if you already got past step number one and you do care about this person, or this is a friend or a peripheral friend or somebody that is a family member that you're going to have to see, and you do want to see the growth and you're invested in that, people always forget communication is 50% how you say it and also what you say. And so racism, conversations of sexism, homophobia, these phobias, all of these things, no one identifies as that personally. They get called it because of how they act. And so no one wants to self-identify as a racist. So you're already in a sensitive place. But you leaning on the fact that you care about this person enough to be invested in their growth, need to understand that you have to express that message in the best digestible way. And it usually means measured, starting from a place of that really hurt me. This is why. And I'm going to explain this whole thing. And it sucks that you have to tone police, but truly at a point we have to get over like being like, oh, it has to happen in this exact way, or I won't feel fulfilled, or they should have known. They don't know. They don't want to know. And from there, based off of their interaction with that first engaging, then you can turn up or turn down. Feel free to turn up, but you have to test the water, because that's how you know whether if it's a slip up or a setup. Because if you come at them like, hey, we've been friends for years, why would you explain your side, and they're like, "Ah, ah, ah." They wanted that. They wanted the smoke, they wanted the beef, they were negging you, and to see how you would react, kind of thing. And they wanted to see if you were going to say something, or if they could get away with that racist bullshit with you and you were going to let it slide. That's how I feel.
No, I think that's well said. Like, what I hear you saying is, know your why, know your motivation, know what it is, what you want to get out of what you want to say, and also gauge like where am I at and how I can have this conversation. And, if we're not ready, then like what will it take? Like, do I want to be speaking up? And if so, what will it take? Like, personally, I feel like it would be wonderful if we could all be that guy in the room. But until then, those that are, I think it's important to like, also look at, can I handle this? My other question for you is, and I think this happens a lot, is, you have friends that are, let's say, like, for example, these friends that I have that I'm wondering, like, is this racism? What is this? Where's this coming from with them? Because that night was a racist night.
Yeah.
And then they have you have mutual friends, and then you have other friends of color that are also their friends. So I've been in both situations, and I'm curious for you, like, what do you do as that other friend of color who's having a problem, with your mutual racist friend? Like, do you have the white person's back? Do you stay neutral? Do you, BIPOC, like, do we always go in? Because I'm noticing this is like, and even for me, it becomes sometimes like, what do you do? Like, I can't tell my friend, and my friend can't tell me. I can't be friends with someone. We're not in, elementary school. So how do you navigate that?
That is such a good question, because honestly, there's no perfect way. And as we touched on before, every person of color is raised differently to believe different things and have experienced different things and internalized different things. There's Black Republicans where I'm from, which is like very questionable to me. But, people are people, and you have to just let them be that, because no one is a monolith. So I think that's the first thing, is understanding that you could be surprised by a person of color. They don't automatically 100% have your side just because they're the other person of color in the room or in the friendship. They may want to be the only friend of color in the friendship. You know what I mean?
Yeah, want to be different and special. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that realistically, what I would do is, reach out to that friend and maybe explain what happened and see how they feel. And from that situation, either they're also a friend to you in that situation, or they actively say, hey, well, they've never done anything racist towards me, blah, blah, blah. And frame it as like a conversation. Like, it's not an indictment on your character if you still want to be friends with them. I just am hurt and am wondering how to navigate. Have you experienced something like this by them? Is this a one-off experience? Those things, like, what they want is for you to feel insecure about reaching out, so that you feel isolated in your feelings, and you can't string together the pattern of, oh no, you act this way, you say these things. My Asian friend, my Black friend, all of us have had an instance with you when you say that stuff. They don't want the story to get fully told. So what they make it feel like is, you're so crazy for reacting this way, and then avoiding you because they don't want to take accountability. And then after a certain amount of time, like, you're still mad, and they triangulate your feelings so that you feel like, am I crazy? Like, was I the one that was being so dramatic? Like, and I'm fracturing all of these relationships, and do I have to cut this person off now? And like, you start to question why you did what you did. And I think that that's also the insidious part of those things. Like, microaggressions and the things around it are subtle for a reason, so that you can't stand up and be like, hey, that was racist, because everyone will be like, what? Like, that's not that big of a deal. I didn't find that racist. But they also isolate you in your feelings. So maybe I would reach out and just say, hey, like, I don't know if you heard, we had this dinner. This is what happened. I'm really hurt by it. I feel like we haven't spoken, da 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 da. And if they're like, oh, well, I just don't see why that's that big of a deal, Or if they're like, now that you say that, when we went here, they embarrassed me like this. That's so interesting. And then you can maybe build a stronger connection with the friend of color,
Yeah.
through the experience,
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, that's
Yeah.
well said. I appreciate that, because at the end of the day, we don't want to be cutting off our, friendships or connections, especially when there's connections like racially alike people, BIPOC people. We're trying to like get over some of these things and
Right.
work, around that whole being pitted against each other. But the other thing too, as you're talking, I'm like, so it's interesting because these people started this conversation and this incident that happened. And it's so funny that they find themselves out of it. And if it were to trickle down to like all these other, spider web connections, I could be in a place where I would have so few friends because I could have allowed that to get to me. And,
Exactly.
I didn't, because I value those other friends and I think people should make their own choices. And, for years I missed a lot of things along the way. And so who am I to assume people to know? And, so I just know my journey. Right. But I just think sometimes it's like so interesting an incident like that happens. And even for my kid, one of his good friends aligned with that other kid. And now it's so weird with his friend, and that other kid's gone. He's out of the picture, whatever. And now my son and this friend are left to figure. So I was like thinking from that perspective too, is how do you navigate those things? And ultimately we, think for ourselves and what is a good and right thing? We're trying to, at the end of the day, we're talking about being kind to humans, and that's what it comes down to. Right. And so So I think your points were great. So is there anything, if we end up being that person in the room, is there anything that you want to add that we didn't talk about, or strategy or advice for folks that, want to be that person in the room, have been that person in the room, or maybe are the reason why there is someone in the room that has had to stand up and say something? Any advice?
I just think we need to be mindful. Like, I don't think we give enough, like, in terms of the cultural conversations that we have racially, about sexuality, identity, all of these things, like, we from the early 2000s to now have grown so much in terms of what we're comfortable with talking about as a culture. And I think that we don't take enough time to stop and think about that and be proud that we're moving the needle. You may think nothing's going anywhere, but then you look back at like early 2000s reality TV and you're like, this is a hellscape. Like, why is this okay? But it's like, so what I mean by that is like the hypersensitivity about how your words can impact another person has benefited us tenfold in our society and allowed us to have more complex conversations. And so whether you're that person in the room or you're the person that's trying to neg that person in the room, it's important that human connection and building community is based in trust and feeling like people can feel safe with each other. And a lot of that is centered around being sensitive to how someone else might feel and running through, hey, do I need to say it like that? Or let me think twice about inserting this into conversation, good or bad. I think if you're that person in the room specifically, you need to take care of yourself and understand that this is a never ending battle. There's a million and one people who think ignorantly, who live their lives that way and are trying to spread that. There are, as you've noticed, kids in the next generation. You would think, why are you saying that? Who raised you to say something like that? But people still exist like that.
Absolutely.
And so you can't fight everybody. You have to really be measured, take care of yourself, and think about when it'll be the most impactful. And understand, if you don't care about a person, you don't have to be invested in their growth. Fuck
Yeah.
those people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's end it all. Fuck those people. No, but I do. This is why I invite you, because you're like my voice of reason when I'm like, fuck this person and that person. But, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's hurt, right? When we say those things, and we're just trying to wield through that, work through that hurt, and get to the, the bigger picture, like you're saying, which is what's the end game? What are we working towards? And so, like I gave you a huge shout out before we started recording episode 91, I believe, that when you were on, my husband had like so many aha moments while he was editing your episode. And he and I have been having a lot of these conversations, and we continue to agree that it really makes a big impact when we start in our own home, in our own circle. Like that dinner was probably the best thing that could have ever happened for his and I relationship. It's so fucking weird to say it, but because of that whole incident, he and I, that whole ally versus accomplice, he understands how to be my accomplice. He knows what he needs to do to step up to fight the fight with me or for me. And I think at the end of the day, that's what, the people that speak up in the room are trying to do or be part of. And I appreciate it, but at the same time, it's like, okay, where is the people in our house or the people in our village that we can go to process this stuff with? Thankfully, my son could come home and talk to us about it.
Right.
Because that's where the growth happens, like you said, not with those people, fuck those people. And, even in these incidents and situations, there's a couple times where I've had people come out of it and say, hey, let's go back and have this uncomfortable conversation and figure this out. So kudos to those people as well, because that is not easy to do, and I'm grateful for that.
And having an open heart. Like I've talked about this before. We've been so socialized for a millennia to be divisive. So that's the natural state of being, to the point that it's like second nature. And so the hard radical work is opening up your heart for forgiveness and mistakes, because cross identities, cross cultures, cross class, you're exposed to specific things for a reason, so that you guys cannot interact together and find common ground. And so to cut people off at the first mistake, instead of allowing them to prove, hey, I went back and read that article, and you know what, I do want to talk about this, or hey, I really feel badly about how this dinner ended, and I do want to talk to you about it and talk through it in a more chill setting. Like, to me, it's like, the avoidance is a choice. So it's like, at the end of the day, it's important that you can spot the people that are actually trying to internally improve and come back and say, hey, I messed up, and be like, you know what? I'm not going to cut you off. You showed and grew, and I can see that and I can trust that. But for the people that just don't want to do it, they don't want to do it. And you cannot make enough excuses for them. They're just not going to do it. No. They don't care.
No.
Yeah.
And I think those are good reminders. Like, those of us that get stuck on trying to shift those people, we just can't. We've all been there when someone can't shift us, so I think no hard feelings, but everyone's journey is at different paces. And so the best thing to do is what you're saying, which is like, think of yourself. Think of, okay, what is it that I can be in charge of, and what is it that I can do here, versus, putting all my good efforts and energy into something that's, like you said, turn your heel and go the other way. And there you go. Like you did your part. You did more than you needed to in that moment. You don't have to be part of that. And that's what matters. So,
100%.
Okay, Madison, thank you for always sharing your wisdom. And for everyone, go for it. So were you going to say something? I didn't want to, sorry.
No, you go. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I was going to say thank you for sharing your wisdom, and for everyone else tuning in. I just hope you all find your own, way, and you can honor your own experiences, whether it's through speaking up in the moment or processing it afterwards. Let's just keep having these conversations. And hopefully we can have more of these Gup Shups. Any last words? Anything you want to leave us with, Madison?
I will say thank you for having me. I always enjoy our conversations, and we do need to book a chat.
Yes.
Just a fun chat.
Yeah.
Just a silly chat.
Yeah.
But I will say that my socials are Madison on all things. I have a podcast called Bloodstained. Season 1 is about slavery, where I talk about history through the lens of true crime. Season 2, I'm starting to work on it. It's about genocide through true the lens of true crime. So get into it. We're halfway through, 6 more episodes to go, and I've been enjoying the journey. So I hope you guys are interested, and I enjoy our conversations always.
Always. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes.